China has built some of the strangest buildings on Earth, and most of them don't make sense. The country has over 3,000 skyscrapers standing right now, nearly 4 times more than the United States, the nation that literally invented the skyscraper. You heard that right. But it's not the quantity that'll blow your mind. It's what these buildings actually look like, because behind every impossible shape is a level of engineering most people never knew existed. So let's start with the buildings that don't even try to look like buildings at all. When buildings stop looking like buildings, you're standing in Langfang, about an hour outside Beijing, and in front of you is a 10-story hotel, but it doesn't look like a hotel. It looks like 3 enormous gods standing shoulder to shoulder, staring you down from 136 feet in the air. This is the Tianzi Hotel, and it holds the Guinness World Record for the biggest image building on the planet. The 3 figures are Fu, Lu, and Xiao, the Chinese gods of fortune, prosperity, and longevity. And they're not decorations stuck onto a building. They are the building. The rooms, the hallways, the presidential suite on the 9th floor, all of it is packed inside the bodies of these 3 figures. You literally check in through the right foot of the god of longevity. The engineering challenge here is something most people never think about. When you shape a building like a human figure, you throw out every standard rule of load distribution. Nothing is symmetrical. Nothing stacks neatly. The skeleton of this thing is an internal steel framework custom fitted to follow the curves of 3 sculpted bodies, transferring weight through paths that no conventional building would ever need. And yet, it's been standing since 2001. But a hotel shaped like gods is just the warm-up. Over in Kunming, in China's southwestern Yunnan province, there's a building shaped like a mobile phone. Not a smartphone, an old-school feature phone, complete with a keypad and a screen. The windows on the lower floors are designed to look like numbered buttons. The upper floors form the screen. There's even a giant sculpted hand gripping the side of the structure as if someone's mid-call. It's 11 stories tall, built in 1999, and for years it served as a landmark sitting above the Xingyao Mobile Phone Plaza on the ground floors below. Now here's what makes it more than a gimmick. This building has a wildly narrow footprint relative to its height, making it vulnerable to wind forces and lateral movement. The reinforced concrete core running through its center is what keeps it from swaying, and the asymmetrical shape means the engineers had to account for uneven wind loads across the entire facade. It was built as a marketing stunt. But structurally, it's solving problems most office towers never have to face. And then there's the one that takes novelty architecture to a completely different scale. In Meitian County, deep in Guangzhou Province, one of China's most celebrated tea-producing regions, there's a 243-foot-tall teapot, not a statue. A functioning building. The Meitian Tea Museum is the largest teapot-shaped structure on Earth, with 15 floors inside, a conference hall, gallery spaces, tea tasting rooms, guest rooms, and a rooftop observation deck overlooking miles of tea plantations. Sitting beside it is a smaller building shaped like a teacup. From a distance, the whole thing looks like an oversized ceramic set dropped into the countryside. But up close, you start noticing the windows, and that's when it clicks, this is real architecture. The bulging, curved walls are a nightmare for structural engineers. No flat planes, no right angles, no repeating floor plates. Every floor is a different diameter. The steel skeleton inside had to be custom fabricated to follow the organic profile, with each ring of structure slightly different from the one below it. The loads don't travel straight down, they follow the curvature, meaning the foundation has to handle forces pushing outward as well as downward. And the whole thing cost around 80 million yuan to build, for a teapot. But if you think a teapot is a bold move, wait until you see the building shaped like money itself. Fangyuan Mansion in Shenyang is a 25-story office tower shaped like a stack of ancient Chinese copper coins round on the outside with a square hole, punched through the center. It stands about 327 feet tall, designed by C.Y. Lee, the same architect behind Taipei 101, one of the tallest skyscrapers in the world. So this wasn't some amateur stunt. This was a deliberate design choice by one of Asia's most accomplished architects, and the engineering had to match the ambition. That square void in the middle of a round building creates massive structural headaches. You can't just leave a hole in the middle of a tower and hope for the best. The loads that would normally travel straight down through a solid core now have to be rerouted around the void, using transfer beams and cantilevers, essentially forcing the building to hold itself up while missing its own center. CNN once named it one of the world's ugliest buildings. It also won an award at the Venice World Architecture Design Exhibition, which tells you everything about how China's strangest buildings live in this space between ridicule and genuine innovation. And that tension between looking absurd and being structurally brilliant is about to get a whole lot more intense. The buildings that should have fallen. Now, you're no longer looking at buildings shaped like objects. You're looking at buildings that seem to defy the laws of physics, structures so geometrically aggressive that your brain can't figure out how they're still standing. Start with the one that rewrote the rulebook entirely. The CCTV Headquarters in Beijing is a 51-story loop. Two massive towers lean toward each other at 6 degrees, connected at the top by a cantilevered overhang that juts out 245 feet from one tower and 220 feet from the other, hanging 37 stories above the ground with nothing underneath it. Your first instinct when you see it is that it should fall, and structurally, that instinct isn't wrong. But here's the part most people never learn. Those diagonal lines crisscrossing the facade, the ones that look like decoration, are the structure. The entire exterior is a continuous tube of steel bracing called a diagram. And where the stress is greatest, the grid gets denser. Where the stress is lighter, the grid opens up. So what you're actually seeing when you look at CCTV is a building wearing its own skeleton on the outside. It was designed by Rem Koolhaas and OMA, engineered by Arup, built in a seismic zone, and won the Best Tall Building Worldwide Award. Koolhaas said the traditional skyscraper had become corrupted by repetitive banality, so he bent it into a loop. And somehow, it worked. But CCTV wasn't the only building in China that decided a straight tower was boring. In Suzhou, there's a 990-foot-tall skyscraper that looks like a giant pair of trousers. The Gate of the Orient is two curved towers that lean inward and merge at the top, forming a colossal arch over a 7-story podium. It cost $700 million and took over a decade to build. Both towers use a composite system of reinforced concrete cores and perimeter steel columns, with a massive belt truss wrapping the point where the two legs join. Everything about this building, the inward lean, the arch, the merging of two independent load paths into one, creates forces that want to pull the structure apart. The engineering doesn't just resist those forces, it redirects them. And while the internet spent years calling it pants to the east, the building quietly became the focal point of an entire business district. Then there's the building that was literally designed around a subway tunnel. Leeza SOHO in Beijing is a 45-story tower, split in half down the middle. The reason is almost too strange to believe a subway service tunnel cuts diagonally beneath the site. So Zaha Hadid architects designed the building in two halves, straddling the tunnel, with the world's tallest atrium spiraling through the void between them. That atrium rises 636 feet and twists 45 degrees as the building climbs, realigning the upper floors with the street grid to the north. Every single floor plate is slightly different. The two halves are connected by 4 sky bridges and wrapped in a single glass shell, so from the outside it reads as one building. But inside, you're standing in an open chasm of light that corkscrews from the lobby to the roof. Zaha Hadid designed it before her death in 2016. It opened in 2019. And the subway tunnel that forced the split? It's still running underneath. But not every gravity-defying building in China goes vertical. In Chongqing, Raffles City takes the concept sideways. 8 towers rise at the junction of the Yangtze and Jialing rivers. And sitting on top of 4 of them, 250 meters in the air, is a 300-meter-long horizontal structure called the Crystal. It weighs 12,000 tons of steel, was hoisted into place in 9 segments using hydraulic strand jacks, and contains an infinity pool, observation deck, sky gardens, and restaurants. If you stood it upright, it would be nearly as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Arab had to design it to flex rather than resist wind and seismic forces. Essentially, a building lying on its side, balanced on top of 4 other buildings, in an earthquake-prone region of China. And then there's a project that isn't fighting gravity at all. It's fighting the idea that a skyscraper can't also be a forest. In Nanjing, MVRDV designed the Oasis Tower's 2 L-shaped, 40-story towers, standing about 490 feet tall, with every single floor shaped slightly differently from the one below it. The curving balconies cascade outward like layered cliff faces, and the entire central space between the towers is a sunken green oasis descending below street level to the metro station underneath. The floor plans look wildly varied, but here's the trick. They're actually almost identical. The only thing that changes floor to floor is the shape of the balcony edge. So what looks organic is actually highly regularized behind the curtain. That's the kind of engineering sleight of hand that defines this entire category. And the next set of buildings takes that trick even further, because they don't just look like nature. They're built to become part of it. Where architecture becomes landscape most, buildings try to block out nature. These ones decided to absorb it. In Shanghai, there's a 300,000 square foot development that looks like a mountain range covered in forest, except it's not a mountain and it's not a forest. It's a shopping mall, office complex, gallery space, and entertainment hub called 1,000 Trees. Designed by Thomas Heatherwick, the building needed at least 800 structural columns just to hold itself up. Most architects would have hidden those columns inside the walls. Heatherwick did the opposite. He pulled them to the outside and turned every single one into a giant concrete planter. Each column widens at the top to hold a living tree, with an automated irrigation system built directly into the structure. Over 70 species of trees, shrubs, and hanging plants now grow across the surface of this thing, changing color with the seasons. The whole structure sits on a rotated 9-meter grid, angled 45 degrees to maximize river views, and the terraced form slopes downward toward the neighboring M50 Arts District, like a hillside descending into a valley. What you're looking at is a building that turned its own engineering necessity into its defining visual identity. That's not decoration. That's structural thinking made visible. But 1,000 Trees isn't the only building in China that decided to become a landscape. In Wujin, there's a building that rises from the surface of a lake, like a lotus flower mid-bloom. The Lotus Building is exactly what it sounds like, a structure shaped like an opening lotus, with petal-shaped canopies of steel and glass fanning outward from a central core. Building over water means deep piles driven into the lake bed to anchor the structure while managing the lateral pressure of the water itself. And those petals cantilever outward at dramatic angles, creating uneven load distribution resolved through the steel rib system hidden inside each curved glass panel. It looks effortless. Structurally, it's anything but. And then there's a building that turned an entire hotel into a reflection. The Sheraton Huzhou Hot Spring Resort is a 27-story ring standing on the edge of Taihu Lake. At night, the building lights up, and its reflection in the lake completes the circle, turning the structure into a perfect glowing ring. That effect isn't accidental, it's the entire design concept. But engineering a ring-shaped hotel means you're distributing guest rooms, corridors, elevators, and amenities along a continuous curve rather than stacking them in a conventional vertical tower. The 2 legs of the ring carry all vertical loads down to foundations that sit partially in the lake, and the curved form means every room has a slightly different floor plate and window angle. It's a building that only makes complete sense when the water is still. These buildings prove that China's architects aren't just building strange shapes for attention, they're engineering living systems. And the next group takes that ambition and adds something no one expected: movement. The buildings that refuse to stand still. Every building you've seen so far has one thing in common: it stands still. The next ones don't. The Fosun Foundation Art Center on Shanghai's Bund waterfront is a building that breathes. Its facade is made of 3 layers of bronze-colored stainless steel tubes, hundreds of them hanging from the 3rd floor and running on motorized tracks. Several times a day, those layers rotate around the perimeter of the building in a slow, choreographed sequence set to music. As the tubes shift, they reveal the glass windows behind them, then the golden balcony on the 2nd floor. then close again like a curtain being drawn on a stage. The whole concept is inspired by the open stages of traditional Chinese theater, and the architects Foster Partners and Heatherwick Studio designed the facade to perform. But making hundreds of metal tubes move in sync, day after day, through Shanghai's humidity, wind, and rain, without jamming or corroding, that's a mechanical engineering problem layered on top of an architectural one. The building is never the same twice. And that's by design. But the Fosun Foundation isn't the only Shanghai building that turned architecture into spectacle. The Louis is a 30-meter-tall structure shaped like a luxury cruise ship, moored in the middle of Shanghai's central business district. Designed by OMA, the hull is clad in metallic monogram panels with a polished steel prow, and the upper decks are sculpted to resemble stacked travel trunks. The engineering required to create a freestanding ship-shaped structure in an urban plaza with 3 levels of exhibition space, retail, and a rooftop cafe is anything but simple. The form is wildly asymmetric. The facade panels are all custom fabricated, and the whole thing had to be assembled on-site without disrupting the surrounding infrastructure. Now shift from spectacle to illusion. The Tianjin Binhai Library looks like it was designed by someone who wanted to trap you inside. A dream. You walk in and you're surrounded by floor-to-ceiling terraced shelves that curve upward in rolling waves around a giant luminous white sphere in the center. It feels like standing inside a canyon of books, but here's what almost no one realizes: most of those books aren't real. The shelves that line the upper walls are actually printed aluminum panels with images of book spines on them. The real books are on the lower accessible floors. The sphere in the center isn't just a design feature, it's an auditorium. And the undulating terraces that look so organic are cast concrete following complex mathematical curves. MVRDV created a building that tricks your brain into seeing infinity where there's actually a carefully engineered illusion, and the structural challenge of spanning that vast atrium while supporting those heavy terraces is far more sophisticated than the Instagram photos suggest. And then there's the Wanda Cultural Center in Wuxi, a cluster of enormous structures shaped like traditional Chinese clay teapots and bamboo steamers. Sitting on the edge of a lake, each rounded, tapered form houses a completely different function. One is a theater, another a cinema, another an exhibition hall. The ceramic cladding that wraps each structure is a custom system designed to follow the complex double-curved surfaces and the challenge of fitting modern program HVAC systems, seating, acoustics. Loading docks inside shapes that were never meant to contain buildings is the kind of problem that only exists in China's architectural landscape. These buildings don't just sit there, they perform, they trick you, and they refuse to behave like architecture is supposed to. And the final group pushes even further into territory where the buildings themselves become symbols of an entire country's ambition. The buildings that became symbols. If every building you've seen so far was China, testing what architecture could look like. These last ones are China declaring what it wants architecture to mean. The Grand Lisboa in Macau is an 856-foot tower shaped like a blooming lotus flower, erupting from a massive golden egg. The tower flares outward as it rises. The upper floors cantilever more than 65 feet beyond the base on each side, creating a silhouette that looks like a flame caught mid-unfurl. The base is an elliptical dome housing a 30,000 square foot casino across 3 double-height floors, clad in over 5,600 panels of glass, arranged in patterns inspired by Fabergé. The structural system transitions from reinforced concrete at the base to steel higher up, allowing the dramatic outward flare while maintaining earthquake resistance. The entire exterior lights up at night with over 16,000 LEDs, turning the building into a golden beacon, visible clear across the Pearl River Delta. It cost over $385 million. It was designed to be the most extravagant building in a city built entirely on extravagance, and structurally, the cantilevers alone would qualify it as a serious engineering achievement. And the next one proves that a hole in a building can be just as powerful as the building itself. The Guangzhou Circle is a 33-story tower shaped like an ancient jade-by disc, a flat ring with a massive circular void, nearly 160 feet in diameter, punched through its center. It stands 453 feet tall on the bank of the Pearl River, and when the water is calm, its reflection completes a perfect figure 8, the luckiest number in Chinese culture. Designed by Italian architect Joseph Di Pasquale, The building was meant to feel natively Chinese, rather than like another imported Western skyscraper. The circular facades contain suspended groups of floors that square the circle, making the interior orthogonal and functional inside a perfectly round shell. The loads travel around the ring rather than straight down, and some floor blocks cantilever out as far as 80 feet. CNN named it one of the 10 most interesting buildings in the world. The internet called it a giant donut, and both are technically correct, but spectacle at the scale of a single tower is one thing. Spectacle stretched across nearly a mile is something else entirely. The 72 Qilu in Guangzhou is a towering complex of traditional Tujia-style stilted buildings stacked to a height of 360 feet, making it the Guinness World Record holder for the tallest stilted building on Earth. The design references the traditional wooden houses of the Tujia ethnic minority, normally built on hillsides with cantilevered wooden platforms. But here, that concept has been scaled up to an almost surreal degree. The complex features a massive opening carved right through the structure 125 feet high and 90 feet wide that echoes the famous Tianmen Cave on nearby Tianmen Mountain. At night, over 36,000 lights illuminate the facade in holographic displays. It's part cultural preservation, part architectural fever dream. Traditional building logic pushed so far beyond its original scale that it becomes something entirely new. And then there's the building that might be the single most ambitious architectural statement China has ever made along a highway. The G60 Science and Technology Cloud Gallery in Songjiang, Shanghai, was designed by Raphael Vignoli and stretches 1.5 kilometers along the G60 Expressway, nearly a mile of continuous elevated architecture. When complete, it will link 22 buildings, each standing about 260 feet tall, arranged in a corridor described as a giant ship floating in the clouds. The concept behind it is pure, relentless forward momentum. The engineering required to create a continuous, elevated structure of that length, managing thermal expansion, wind loads, seismic drift across different foundation conditions, and the logistical challenge of building a mile-long structure along a highway that's not architecture trying to be strange. That's architecture trying to be a statement about where an entire country is headed. And maybe that's the real answer to why China built the strangest buildings on Earth. It was never about being weird. It was about proving that if you can imagine it, a teapot, a phone, a pair of chopsticks balanced in the sky, a building that breathes, a library full of fake books, a golden donut on a river, a mile-long ship in the clouds, you can engineer it, you can build it, and you can make it stand. Every single one of these buildings looks like it doesn't make sense, but now you know the truth. They all do.